Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we just broke down the incredible game between Tyrese Maxey, the 76ers, and Jalen Brunson and the Knicks, in which the Sixers were able to save their season, extending the series to Game 6 back in Philly coming up tomorrow night. It was a great game overall, went to overtime. Lots of fun to watch. Tyrese Maxey played hero, scored 7 points in the last 20 seconds to save the Sixers season. An insane performance, an insane stretch. Very impressive. In this segment here, we're going to break down the other NBA action from last night, including a dominant win by the Milwaukee Bucks over the Pacers without their two stars, and a scratch and claw victory by the Cleveland Cavaliers over the Orlando Magic last night in really what wasn't a good game by either of those teams. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCpodcast.net, leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do leave a tip or donation, we appreciate anything you do give. You have to go to that link on the screen right now. That's gsmcpodcast.net. Appreciate anything you do give. We appreciate all of your support. We appreciate all of you for sticking around and watching. Like I was saying, we have a lot to break down still. So we are going to continue talking about the NBA. We're going to talk about the Bucks. In what felt like a game that the Pacers had in the bag, a game that the Pacers were going to win regardless, because the Bucks couldn't get it done with Damian Lillard, and now they don't have him or Giannis. But instead, the Bucks come out and humiliate the Pacers. It is one of those games, and I haven't seen this in a long time, especially in the playoffs. Your team's up 3-1 in the playoffs, and they just looked dejected, especially at the end of the third and in that fourth quarter. The Pacers just looked like a broken team. You know, they dominated, and they were winning pretty handily in the first quarter, and then the second and third quarter, they just disappeared. They couldn't hit a shot. Milwaukee couldn't miss that entire game. There was a stretch where I don't think I saw the entire, at least the first 6 minutes of it. I don't think they missed a single shot, and you could tell the Pacers were dejected. There was plenty of talking. It was really funny on the broadcast. You could hear a Bucks fan in the background going crazy behind the announcers. Very interesting, but that's besides the point. The Bucks were just came out with passion, and it's something that's going to be really tough to keep up. I guess they started Bucks on 44% from 3, especially down the stretch. And the Pacers, I apologize. They shoot 52% from the field. I knew that sounded a little low, and 37% from 3. The Pacers just looked dejected. They really did. Their heads were down, their body language wasn't there, and this was with about 10 minutes left in the game. They just looked like they were done and out of it, and I hope they're able to bounce back, because there wasn't anything in that game, even at the end that showed me, hey, they're getting their confidence back. They're going to be able to come in and be effective in Game 6 tomorrow when they have to go back to Indiana, maybe win it in front of their home crowd. That's definitely going to help. They need to get some confidence back. They need to come out in Game 6, and they need to come out quickly in Game 6. They need to come out with a passion, and they need to make their shots, because the way that they looked at the end of this game makes me think that the Bucks could run away with this series, especially with, Dame and Giannis were both game-time decisions in Game 5, and there's a chance that they're able to come back in Game 6, at least one of them, and maybe that messes with whatever magic the Bucks had last night, maybe I know this is a joke, but I've seen some people pushing the joke that the Bucks are better without their stars, and clearly they're not. That's just recency bias right there. One game in the playoffs, but there is something to a team with nothing to lose, that underdog mentality that they have that can really propel some teams to another gear sometimes. And sometimes it takes being down some of your guys. You don't have that big guy to rely on and prop up, so everyone else feels like they need to step up, and everyone did. And you can keep that mindset even with the stars coming back. If they can stay in the mindset they were for Game 5, it's going to be really tough to eliminate this team, especially a team like the Pacers that struggles at defense, really does. Both of these teams really struggle with defense. If you catch one of them in a bad shooting light like you did with the Pacers last night, it's going to be a lot tougher for these teams to win games, because if they fall behind, and their shots aren't falling, they're not going to be able to make those defensive stands to have time to come back. So both of these teams have the same weakness, and it really just depends on who comes out shooting better that night. I think the Pacers, they just need to win one of the next two, and that puts them in a much better situation than the Bucks, especially with how the Bucks had been playing down the stretch of the regular season and the beginning of this series. Excuse me. Really, outside of the first half of the first game, until this game, the Bucks were getting trashed on almost all phases of the game. So the Pacers need to get that momentum back. They need to come out quick, because the way they were looking at the end of the game is not the way that, if I'm a fan of a team, if I'm an analyst, it's not something that you want to look at and for the future and say, hey, this is something I feel comfortable rolling with. It's a mess, and I think they can get out of it. It's one game. They're athletes. They go through this all the time, but it carries a little extra weight because there was a little bit of animosity between the two teams this season, with their tight games, the in-season tournament upset, the whole issue with the ball and Giannis midway through the season when Giannis went off franchise record points, and there was a confusion about the game ball. It's you could tell they were really dejected after that one, and they'll be able to come back. I'm not too worried. But I do think the Pacers are still going to be able to steal this series. And the final game from last night, in the NBA at least, the Cleveland Cavaliers took on the Orlando Magic back home in a gritty, really an ugly game. And, it really, when you're watching the Eastern Conference, you see teams like the Celtics up there, and you watch these 4-5-3-6 games. These Bucks, Pacers, Magic, Cavs games, and it doesn't feel like any of those teams should be in the playoffs. And I know that might sound a little harsh, because the Bucks, they have those talent. The Bucks and the Pacers, they have the talent. They have the people to come in here and say, hey, we belong here. They have the ability to show that every once in a while, but on a night in, night out basis, they don't feel like the kind of teams that should be able to make a playoff run. In fact, I feel very comfortable in dismissing that entire middle of the bracket in the second round. And it's not a position that you find yourself in a lot of times, but it really kind of shows me how weak the Eastern Conference was. I was watching this game last night, the Magic Cavs game, and my main takeaway from it wasn't the fact that, hey, this is a tight, entertaining, contested game, 1-point game. You look at the score today, you say, oh, that must have been an exciting finish. And sure it was. You had a last-second shot attempt. It came down to the last possession, but everything leading up to it was just kind of ugly basketball. The Magic played better in this game. The Cavs went on multiple stretches where they didn't score a point. This was their problem in Orlando. The offense went silent. It happened again tonight, but they were able to or last night, but they were able to overcome it. They were able to see the traps they were falling into and get out of it just in time. But you know, it's not the way that you're going to win games in the future. Against this young Magic team that also has the same issue sometimes, they go on stretches where they can't score, especially on the road. 18-23 record away from home. You see it's night and day when at home. If this game was in Orlando, the Magic would have ran away with it, I think. And Paolo Banchero, he's awesome. He's so good at basketball. And he's leading to almost 4 points in a game that kind of, when you're going into it, feels like a big momentum shifter. I know there's a stat out there that like 70% of teams that win Game 5 win the whole series. But this doesn't feel like it was a big momentum shift, It still felt like Orlando had all the momentum and Cleveland was just doing everything it could to just, stay alive. And Cleveland, for the most part, led throughout this entire game. They weren't winning 100% of the time, but it felt like they were always going to win this game. The Magic never really seemed like they were putting a serious fight up, at least in my opinion, when I was watching this. The Cavaliers just didn't look good. The Magic were able to hang in there, but it didn't really seem like they were ever going to actually run away with the game. And Cleveland had so many opportunities to put the Magic away. Every single time they went up by 10, they would just stop scoring until the Magic either tied the game or took a 1-point lead or got it within one possession. And then they'd be like, "Oh shoot, guys, we need to turn the Jets back on. We need to start taking this seriously again. We need to beat this team. This is an important game." And then they go back ahead, but they're not playing with that kind of passion. Their offense, they're taking shots way too early in the shot clock, especially down the stretch. It was a one possession game. They had the ball with about 40 seconds to go, full shot clock. Donovan Mitchell, instead of waiting for the entire shot clock to wind down, he does a quick dribble move about halfway through the shot clock and puts up a contested mid-range shot instead of, letting the shot clock run down a little bit. And I know you want to get you want to put up a good shot so you can, make it a 4-point game, because at that point it was a 2-point game. So you didn't need a 3. So he had the right idea. But it kind of was it was more like symptomatic of the entire offense, because he seemed like he got impatient waiting up at the top, and he made his drive way too early, and he gave the Magic time to set up a good shot to try and take a game winner. Now, the Cavs defense was able to come up clutch and make a stop on that last possession. But they shouldn't have been put in that situation where they had to defend a whole half-court set. You could have let that clock run down instead of letting it run to like 15 seconds, which is when the Magic got the rebound. They could have let it run down to, say, I don't know, 10 seconds. They let it run down a little more, give the Magic less time to get up the court and set up a play. It was kind of symptomatic of how Cleveland had been playing this entire series. They just get too comfortable, and then they realize, oh shoot, we should be winning this game. And I don't know why that's happening, because Cleveland is a team that has the ability to turn it on, but they just seem like they're sleepwalking through this series for some reason. And the Magic aren't a team that you can take lightly. I know that they've gotten away with it so far, and maybe they really do feel like they're just a better team. They picked this matchup. They intentionally lost to the Hornets on the final day of the regular season to get the 4 seed so they could play the Magic instead of potentially playing the Sixers. And getting that 2 seed and potentially playing the Sixers like the Knicks are. There were a lot of... It was a really interesting strategy, and it feels like they're just too comfortable against the Magic. And they can't do that if they expect to win. We've seen what happens when it goes to Orlando, and I know they've been able to take every game at home, but this last one it doesn't fill you with hope as a Cleveland fan. Both of these teams feel like they're just destined to get swept in the second round. Unless, Cleveland can show me something. Because when I'm watching it, it doesn't, like I said, it didn't feel like the Magic were ever going to win this game until that last possession when Cleveland made a great play on a three-point shot that potentially could have, if it had gone in, given the Magic a lead. It just wasn't a good game. It was a sloppy game. It heads back to Orlando, and if Cleveland continues to play like this, they're going to lose this series. A Game 7 is a different situation. The Magic seem to have the ability to lock in when they need to, and I haven't seen that out of the Cavs yet. I need to see that out of the Cavs. I need them to play a game where their offense doesn't disappear for multiple times. There were multiple 8-0, 10-0 runs that the Magic went on in this game alone. This is not a winning formula. This is not a successful formula if you are a Cavaliers fan or a Cavaliers player. You need to light a fire under your team. Be competitive in Orlando at a minimum. Don't get blown out again on the road. Because as good as the Magic are, they're not beat you by 40 points good. Consistently on the road. This isn't we should get blown out on the road every time Cavs team. This Cavs team is good. They have Donovan Mitchell. They have Darius Garland. They have Jared Allen. They have Evan Mobley. This is a really talented Cavs roster, and they have Karis LeVert. They have a really good roster, and you could continue to go on, but they just don't have that fire that's lit under them, and I need to see it before I really start to believe in them. We'll see what happens back in Orlando, but they haven't shown any fight, at least in the last 3 games. So it's a little concerning, and the Eastern Conference will get better, but it shows to me how weak the Eastern Conference really was this year. And I know we all knew that, but it's one of those things that becomes more and more clear as you're watching these playoff series. Anyway, in our third segment coming up next, we are going to move out of basketball, talk a little bit about baseball. We had some major injury news coming out of the major leagues, so we're going to talk about that. That'll be coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.